The fellow I was dating, Dave, was in ROTC. He was a Marine, but he wanted to fly. And then a few weeks later, he asked me to marry him. And we knew all this time that he would be going to Vietnam because he felt the call to go, because he knew that he was going to a place where men would be dying and they really needed to know the gospel. So when he got to Vietnam, he told me that he put the throne from the 4 spiritual laws on the back of his helmet, his flight helmet, and put the cross on the throne, so that anybody that was sitting behind him in the helicopter would see that and ask him about it, and led several of them to Christ. And he shared Christ with a lot of men that were so grateful, because they were very fearful of what was going to happen every day. He was there during the Tet Offensive, and a year had gone by. They went for 13-month tours, and he was ready to come home in a month when I received the news that his plane had been shot down, and having a Marine come to my door to tell me that my husband had died. And the first words out of my mouth was just, "He's with the Lord." I mean, it was just so amazing to me, and I felt like half of me was in heaven in a way. And since I was such a new Christian, I really hadn't learned much about what happened, except that I knew you went to heaven, but I really dove into the scriptures to see what happened when someone came to know the Lord and they died. And I read verses like that he would go immediately into the presence of God, that in Colossians 3, which said that we should have as little desire for the world as a dead person. And I remember thinking, wow, Dave's in heaven. I would never want to bring him back to this world. And I began to just have that sense of what he was experiencing there. And then the other thing was what I was going to do, and I read in the first chapter of Ephesians that all that Christ had could be available to me. And at that time I thought, I'm really going to need the power of Jesus Christ to go through this. If you're with Christ consistently, if you meet with him all the time, he will be with you in crisis. And that's what I really saw God working in my life in the crisis, and bringing back all the verses that I had memorized or just even read. Nothing will come back to you that you haven't put into your life. And so all those verses started flowing into my head. And then that was the time that my dad received Christ, because people were calling me, people were sending letters. Bill Bright called and prayed with me. And my father was just blown away that there was this huge family of people that loved the Lord but loved me, and that they were praying for me. And as he saw me go through that crisis, really lifted up on the arms of prayer, he thought, this is a great God, and I want to know him. I got on the plane several days later to go home, and I just had such a sense of Dave being with the Lord and thinking about that. And I really wanted the funeral to be a celebration, to share what God had done in Dave's life. And so part of the program was letters that he had written about the Lord and how he had wanted to share Christ with the men in Vietnam, and how really eternity was the only thing that really mattered. And he said, we don't think about that a lot when we're here in the United States, but the men there were facing that every day. And as a result of that, Dave's father became a Christian. He came to Christ, and some of the other members of his family as well. And then a few days after that, I received the memorial service bulletin that they had in Vietnam, where on the base that they'd had a memorial service for Dave. But it was a dual one, and it was for his co-pilot too. Dave he had told me that he had shared with Ed. He was the first person in Vietnam who had come to Christ that Dave had shared with. And so together they went down in the plane, and then they walked into eternity together. And that was so comforting for me to know that this was his best friend, his co-pilot, but also a brother in Christ. Later, when I received the insurance money for the military insurance money, we decided to give that to start a ministry in Vietnam. And they really didn't have one then, so the ministry started there. Dave, while he was there, also had an influence going into some of the villages. He was up near the North Vietnam border, and so he took people in and brought supplies in for the people in the village that he went to, Baben, and we sent a lot of supplies from home. And apparently they had a memorial service there for him too. So I just prayed for Vietnam over the years that many people would come to Christ. And the verse that stood out with me was, if a seed falls into the ground and dies, it becomes a plant. And I felt like there was a seed planted in Vietnam as well as here.